Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Science of Soul podcast. Today I'm going to be joined by Abdin and Bablu, and we're talking about something quite serious, something about what's affecting the entire world right now, but specifically our brothers and sisters in the United States. It's something that we felt we shouldn't be quiet about, because to be quiet is to be complicit. So we hope we said the right things, but we said things that we felt were true. So please enjoy and share, and above all, stay safe and look after each other. All right, so I'll just start with talking about how yesterday there was actually a demonstration in Reading. Do you guys know about it?
Yeah. No, I just only heard.
Did you go?
Yeah, I did go. I was remember I was trying to find someone to go with, and I was struggling to find anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So in the end, I took Sophia, and yeah, it was for her. It was quite a powerful experience because she was trying to understand what is going on and why people are so angry and why people are here. And I told her before we went that, you know what, just expect there's going to be a little bit of, bad language when people are giving their speeches. They're going to be angry and passionate, and she was like, oh, why are they so angry? And I explained what had happened, and it got her really emotional.
Oh, wow.
She's 7, and because she's homeschooled, her understanding of her racial identity is kind of different to how mine was going to school. Because when I went to school, it was like, I am different. So she doesn't really know how to,
You're already identified in a different group.
Yeah, so she never got that feeling of, oh, I'm someone different. So when she heard about, specifically with what happened to George Floyd and the police officer pressing down on his neck and all the deaths that had come before that, she got really, really upset. And so we told her about make a little placard to take to the demonstration, and she put "racism is stupid." Now, obviously, you guys think, oh, that's so mild, but for her, in our house, we don't swear, and the word "stupid" is
Powerful.
That's you're not allowed to say that word. So she's like, "Dad, can I use that word?" And I was like, "Yeah. Why do you want to use it?" She goes, "That's the worst word I know." So yeah, today we got Bablu. Abdin obviously is a regular host of the podcast, but today we got Bablu, and I think it was appropriate to get you on because this is something that you've thought about, and this is something that you have a deep understanding of and feel strongly about. So yeah, what were you guys talking about earlier about this whole thing?
My understanding of it is, the thing that surprised me is after he got killed, when I saw the video, for me, it was another Black Death, which I think I've seen over the last 7-8 years since YouTube and internet's exploded with the social media. And I thought, another Black Death, nothing's going to happen. It's been happening for years and years and years. Nothing's changed. But I was a bit surprised to see the reaction, the whole community, the whole world's come together. And the craziest thing was, I mentioned earlier on, is people from all the way to now parts of the world know about it. It's such a serious, a war-torn country, and they've got a picture of Floyd.
Wow.
And it's just saying, racism needs to stop, and that's in Syria. And it was on a building that just had rubbles all over it, and it was just a pillar just standing with his face on it. And it was just, that alone just shocked me, how powerful this movement's going now. But you know what? It's at the end of it, even though we're doing all this protest, I don't know if it's going to change anything. That's the only thing. I know we have to protest and show how we all feel, but is it going to change? Is it going to change the outcome of how ethnic minorities, especially blacks, are treated in America?
That's a good point, actually. And get Abdin in on this. What do you feel about protesting and the importance of it, and whether it's effective or whether it's something that sometimes is not effective because things get confused? For example, in America now, there's a big discussion about how the protests have been hijacked by looters and rioters who are, kind of muddying the water of what's trying to be expressed.
Yeah. I think the best thing to do, how do we approach it? I think if there's no protest, then there's nothing, right? Some obscure people might talk about it behind closed doors, and everyone will forget, and it will just carry on as normal, or we will allow it to carry on as normal.
Yeah.
Regardless of change, regardless of whether there is going to be any change because of these protests, I think people need to, we need to show that, no, actually, you know what? A minority shouldn't have power. A minority shouldn't have, power over everybody. Like, and when we look at America right now, it's astonishing that this lunatic is saying, I'm going to set the military on you.
Who are you referring to?
A lunatic.
Donald Trump, yeah?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's Donald Trump.
But think about it, right? If we don't protest, we're allowing these people to stay in power, at that level. Whether they are demonstrating their power, we can do anything. We can do it. That is what this guy is saying. If we do not protest, if we do not shout about, you cannot do that, nothing's going to happen. We are still going to be oppressed. We are still, as people, we have to remember we've come from a background which is a minority background, and I personally think I've been oppressed as a child. I'm not saying by police and everything. That is true as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that the police in this country don't oppress minorities. I think they're racist. They're all racist.
We've all faced racism.
Hold on, all of them.
I'm getting a bit too emotional, but you know what I mean. This is the thing. This is what I guess this is what this type of thing does to people. That it makes them go to that extreme, and there's no need for it. Both sides go to the extreme, and you know what? And I'm going to put one side is a good side. And one side is a bad side. And, that is how sometimes we do need to look at it. Bad guy, good guy.
So just to clarify, when you say there's a bad side and a good side, you mean the good side is people and humanity and the bad side is racist? That's what you mean, right? You're not talking about white and black.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because this is sometimes the trap that you can fall into, is that you can really easily fall into the camp of your ethnicity or the camp of the side, and then look at the other as the other. So you could look at white people as a collective racist body, as opposed to a sort of system that's been inherited over time that people maybe don't understand, and they might perpetuate it, but they're not really, they don't mean it, and they don't, they're not invested in it in the same way that, say, for example, some institutional leaders are.
Yeah. But, even that, isn't it, is one of those things where, where you think, are people being cornered into feeling like that? Mm-hmm. Where, you look at, I've seen a few videos now where police have approached black men and they're like, I'm not going to move, my hand is up in the air. And, I can quite easily see how the notion of us and them comes into, into their mind, into their consciousness, into people's consciousness, because ultimately the people who are the perpetrators, the racists, essentially that is what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. Them and us, and ultimately our animalistic side, our primitive side, will do that straight away. We need to protect ourselves. We need to protect ourselves from this threat, and this threat is coming from one type of people. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but or that's the right thing. But I can see how it becomes easy for people to start thinking like that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this I might be completely wrong, but for me at the moment, and my thoughts might change on this. Who is ultimately driving those thoughts? It's the racists themselves. Mm-hmm. The racists are ultimately, they are the true bad guys.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And making the whole situation worse.
I'll say one thing. With myself, over the last few weeks and months of these things developing in the States, I it's just my nature to try and avoid this type of stressful information. So I'm off social media and I don't like following these types of things. I told you the other day, I was just scrolling through YouTube and I saw a thumbnail that implied something violent related to race happened, and it just ruined my day. So I actively avoid that type of stuff. But what brought it to my mind a little bit more, and this, shout out to a few of my white English friends, Robert, Adam Cole, Adam Turner, Nick, James Terry. These guys we have a group. Like, we've been friends since we were in secondary school and primary school. And on that group, Robert was the one who said, look, I'm just saying this stuff is happening and it bothers me and it's not right. And then everyone else started chiming in and saying how they felt about it, and they think it's disgusting. And they were saying that they, as people of privilege, do need to take more responsibility and action in trying to make it somehow better for people in their in their sphere, And Adam, who's married to Kate, who's Afro-Caribbean, she gave some input as to like how it can feel for a black woman in the United Kingdom, and she said some things that even me being from an ethnic minority and being Muslim, a group that you could say has been targeted, even I was like, wow, I didn't realize people are feeling this. Because we're Muslims and because we're Asians and Bengalis, we only think about sometimes what what happens in our realm.
Yeah.
And when I was reading some of the stuff that she said that she faces, and also one of my other friends, James, in the group, mentioned one of his black friends suffers these things, I was like, wow, subhanAllah, I had no idea that, I really thought the world had moved to a place where these things don't exist, these ways of looking at things don't exist. So now I'm thinking about it because my white friends brought it to my attention in a way that, a lot of Muslim speakers are talking about it. I saw Sheikh Omar Suleiman say some amazing things about it, and a few other sheikhs. But I feel like some of our community, especially the Asian Muslim community, are a little bit quiet on this. And it's unfortunate because we are, firstly, we are all human beings who, whether you look at it scientifically, this is really interesting, whether you look at it scientifically or you look at it from a dogmatic theological perspective, we came from a single pair, right? Right? You're like, I think you told me that. And that's fantastic. That's amazing that ties us all together as one human collective. But on top of that, we are also a minority who knows what it feels like to be to be marginalized, to be oppressed, and yet some of us and abused, and we are a little bit quiet about that. And that's why when you spoke on the phone earlier, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. You had some really passionate views, and I thought it was really important because sometimes our community just, we're just talking about running our restaurants and the committees in the masjid.
I reckon the way we are versus others is because because we're Muslims. Because racism is stamped out of Islam completely, and that's what I think gives us. That's what we don't talk about, I don't think, because Islam is what we use to help us to defend against racism and to fight against it. It doesn't keep us down, and that's why I reckon it gives us the strength to overpower racism. So being a Muslim, I think, we've got advantage over a lot of these other people that don't have Islam.
Yeah,
I think it plays a massive impact.
I think you're right, and one amazing thing about Malcolm X's life is. So when he started in his journey of black activism and civil rights, he kind of didn't want help from white people, and he was
white man's the devil. That's what
white man is the devil. And it was after he did Hajj and he became into Muslim in normative Islam, in Sunni Islam, that he thought, the solution for the states, specifically he said for the states, is Islam.
Yeah, and his view on racism just went by the white man. He saw them as brothers and sisters.
Yeah, subhanAllah. I mean, this is an important way that we feel, but right now, I don't want to make it about like, the communities in America, like George Floyd's community and these other communities, like we have to push Islam on them. But the beautiful thing is that as Muslims, I think what's powerful about what you're saying is we have a strong view that there's no place for this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't hold on to it.
Yeah.
I think another big difference is how us ethnic minorities or people of color view the world different to someone of a white origin. I had a conversation the other day while I was at work. I was working on his telephone line, and he came up to me, and he brought up the conversation about politics. I don't never talk about politics. You know, it could go completely wrong. And we brought up and said, what's going on in America with the killing of that black man? I said, what do you mean? He said, it's horrible, it's wrong. I said, okay, can you explain? He said, yeah, the police are a bit heavy-handed, but then again, there's loads of guns in that country, so they have to be heavy-handed. So he felt sorry for what's happened, but he didn't see the bigger picture. So I said, like, he's not the first black person to die, and he won't be the last an innocent black person getting killed. It happens every other month. It's like a normal occurrence. And they've been suppressed for over 400 years. But he could not relate to me on that. Like, he could not feel what I'm feeling. Yes, he saw a really tragic event, but he didn't see what I'm seeing, that there's a minority of people getting oppressed and killed for no reason whatsoever. And he just doesn't understand that. He just doesn't get it.
What did he say? What was his response?
He just stayed quiet. Like, he just started on a subject on how the government is, how Trump is. I said, it's not about the government Trump. This system in America has been...
It happened under Obama.
It happened under Obama. So the system that was put in 400 years ago is by design to suppress these people. Even after they came out of apartheid, the system never really changed. Yes, it gave them a bit more freedom, but they're still suppressed in many places. It's just by design. It's ingrained into the legal system where black people or minority people will get suppressed. Unless that needs an overhaul. But I don't know if protesting going to make any difference, but it needs a massive change. It's not. I can't see America changing anytime soon. Going on to that, it's not just America. Another issue is in Canada. It's got large... protected Native American population. They're one of the poorest, got the highest crime rates, and they get killed quite a bit, actually.
By police?
Police, yes.
I can't imagine Canadian police killing people.
Yeah, it happens. They die. A lot of them is unknown deaths. That's how it's...
Not reported?
Not reported, or they don't know how he died, or they couldn't get the reports. They're so at disadvantage. And then you go to Australia, same thing with the blacks, Aborigines. Since 1991, there's been 432 Aborigines killed in custody. How does that happen?
Wow.
So it's not in America, but America we see a lot because it's always in the news and it's always happening. But it happens other places, but it's kept more quiet.
Yeah.
And the thing that's in place is, and I'm not trying to turn this into a race or anything.
Yeah.
The way we see the world and how the white population of the world is very different, and they won't understand what we're feeling.
Sure.
So it's trying to make them understand is really hard.
Yeah. So then what do you think is, like, and Abdin, you're an educator and you're someone who is great at communication, and you work in a very mixed environment. What do you think, well, this goes to both of you, but Abdin specifically, like, what do you think is the solution to try and get people to understand and to come around to your way of thinking? Even if they don't agree with you, but they can, they can come...
I think that's hard, man. That is hard. And honestly, the thing is ultimately just no one should make us shut up. I think that's and this is why I say, protesting, why not? Whatever it is, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
And obviously, people are committing crimes and people are destroying other people's things, but people are angry. And the reason why, I was holding a lot of emotions in, and I thought I'm going to just let rip. For me, there's two things that has been brewing inside me. Firstly, that, growing up, I lived in Reading, right? Town centre, where now it's completely multicultural. It's a multicultural area. Back then it was multicultural. We had a neighbour they were so racist. And my whole childhood was terrorised by these guys.
Wow.
We had fear of them, that they would set their dogs on us. Even till now, I have this, this innate fear of dogs.
Which stem from that.
Yeah. They were extremely racist. And they lived 1 to 3 doors away from us. And then that is how I grew up. And then going to boarding school, Islamic boarding schools, and white people come into our schools with guns. After 2007, the 7/7 bombing, we had to, we were 16, 17, we had to patrol our school so that, if there was any commotion, we could alert the people, and we had to defend ourselves because we couldn't just call the police. The police won't come if we call the police. Those periods, I haven't that we had this type of attacks. I haven't seen a single police officer come to do anything. And I understand the frustration, and that is minuscule compared to the stuff that the black community, the Aborigines, all these communities, the Indian community, everywhere around the world, you can say. And I work with. I'm not. By no means am I being racist, but we have to understand everywhere, for some reason, the white man has oppressed people.
Yeah, but this comes to colonization.
That's
the root of all of this.
Well, that is what I'm saying, isn't it? The white man has, and that is something maybe that those, I'm not saying the generations now, they have changed. I'm not going to say everyone's changed. The people around us, I can definitely say that they have changed, right?
Yeah.
But it can't be forgotten. It can't be forgotten.
So
because we don't. Sorry, Bablu. We cannot let that be forgotten, because there will be no lesson. There will be no teaching from that. And ultimately, what I see right now is that they just want to forget about it, like it never happened. It happened. You killed. You didn't, but your great granddad was involved in allowed these crimes to happen, where black men were lynched, that black men were transported over the oceans like worse than animals. They'd be thrown over if there was a shipwreck or if there was a storm, like there was nothing.
Yeah, Zubair, can you bring out the postcard in America with they used to do in America with black people getting lynched? It was actually a postcard they used to use.
And the second thing that was, to kind of add to the wound was, I'm sure Jubair would appreciate, is the video of George Floyd, when he was begging for his life. We've both been in chokeholds, haven't we, Jubair?
Yes, yeah. You're talking about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And are they pleasant?
They're not. But what I will say that's even crazier on your point is when we do chokeholds, we do it how it's supposed to be done.
Exactly.
That was a knee.
That was a knee in someone's throat, and
with the floor on the other side. Like a chokehold is very controlled. Like someone will pass out and you can release, but
the fear when as soon as like anyone I know they are about to get, you have this fear in your heart, which makes the whole scenario worse.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to calm down, but even though you know that if you tap out, that person is going to let go. You have this. It's like a pending doom.
Yeah, I think what made people so angry in this particular case as well is that you can, not that I advise anyone to watch the video, but you can hear him like saying, "I can't breathe."
For his mum.
Yeah, he's asking
for his mum.
He was basically begging for his life.
He's asked for his mum. He's calling out for mum. That's.
Yeah.
We can't forget. We shouldn't forget, and we shouldn't sit quiet, and we shouldn't let them release the military on them. So what?
No, they definitely should not release the military.
No, what I mean. It shouldn't stop us just because this lunatic threatens people. It shouldn't stop us.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think even when you went onto your your speech, your rant, and I'm not saying rant to like in any way take away from it, because I agree with it. When you went on your rant, part of me was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to edit this, and then I decided, you know what, I'm not gonna edit it, and I'm not gonna cut anything, because what you said is inherently true. White people have had a big part in the subjugation of black people and people of native communities. So there's no, you should not apologize for the truth. You should not be ashamed of stating that as a fact. But what I would say is that this whole thought process came to me from a group of white people, and sometimes when you start when you make that line so strong in the sand, there is no path of reconciliation, because it's like, yeah, you're over there and I'm over here, you did this, this is, you need to do this for me. And the lesson that we get from people like Malcolm X, who faced some of the most atrocious things in the history of the civil rights movements, with what happened to his father and with what happened to the people who he knew, and even on his own life, his grandmother, all these people. But he was still able to come to, through Allah and through spirituality and through religion, he was able to come to this idea that, you know what, people are going to do evil things to each other. And there is a history of, even in Islam, like there was slaves. Slavery is not explicitly haram. And even though Islam encourages the freeing of slaves, there were many Sahaba who were like said, you could say, racist things to other Sahaba. And they had, the Prophet ﷺ checked them for it and said, you have to apologize for this. But it's something that exists in different forms. Like if you look in India right now, the Muslims are being oppressed, but that is Indian on Indian violence, And if you look at the history of like other conquests, like Mongolians massacred huge swathes of Muslim population, and that's basically a group of Asian people massacring another group of Asian people. I think it is a human thing, but you are 100% right. What we are living with now is the remnants of that colonialism. It's the remnants of those actions, which actually is not even that old. Like India only got independence like 70 years ago, barely. That's in some people's lifetime still, and
well, I mean, the thing is, like, obviously we shouldn't become, or the black community shouldn't become what had happened, those evil people that had committed all these crimes. But there shouldn't be an effort to forget. I feel like there's an attempt to kind of wipe that part of history out completely. Let's forget about it. Let's not talk about it anymore. Why are we talking about it?
I get that from a lot of white people. I get that from. They're like, oh, what's happened? Our forefathers did it. Let's forget about it. So if your forefathers if did it, you're the new generation, and will make up for it. We ain't gonna, unless you pay repercussion, pay billions of pounds to the black people for the slave labor. Then we might be able to forget about it. Pay back what you owe. You can't forget about it. You can't just rub it off. You stole stuff, give all that stolen stuff back. You've turned all these people into slaves and made them work for free, and that's how you built your massive, powerful country. Pay them back.
Okay, well, I mean, maybe you don't have to. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you don't even have to apologize. Right?
You can't forget.
Learn from it, right?
No, if you're going to say forget about it, pay him back. You can't forget something.
At least learn from it. At least, okay, you know what? We want to forget about it, so we're going to change the way we behave.
No, you don't forget about that, and they owe.
Because ultimately, forgive and forget is for those people who do not carry on with the behavior.
Forgive and forget is for people that know the crimes that have been committed and the system that has been created. They're the people that say that. Not the ones in minority. We're in this system. We have no choice. How we are at disadvantages in this system. Forgive, learn from it. We're still, even if they learn from it, we're going to still be at a disadvantage. It doesn't change anything. The whole system in a whole needs to change. And if they can't do that, then pay us back everything they owe.
What do you mean the whole system?
The whole system, the system that was put in 400 years ago with colonization, that system that we're in right now.
And how would you change that?
I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. That's something you can't forget.
You see, that's a massive. You're
saying forget and learn. No, you cannot forget that.
No. I'm saying
you will never.
When do we forget and
it won't
forgive?
happen.
When do we forgive and forget?
We've been forgiven because we haven't reacted to it.
No. I'm saying when do we? When do you really forgive and forget some action or something that someone has done to you? Really, in our own lives, is when that person has changed their behavior. And they treat you differently, or they don't they don't do those things again. Because I'm not saying.
But the difference is what we face, our children are going to face, and their children are going to face, and their children are going to face it.
Yeah.
The vicious cycle won't end anytime soon.
No, I mean, you never know, right? You never
know. Here's something that I have to say is in the UK, despite a lot of these systemic racist issues still being here, it's not completely gone. It's very different to the United States. Right?
Yeah.
We've got Asian and Muslim people in high positions of power. We've got black people, and we've got a variety of different ethnic minorities in positions of power, whether it be in government or it be through business or it be through community leadership. And we do have the rights of our right to worship the way we want and
Sure.
things like that. So
Really, I'm slightly on the fence that we should be appreciating on what they're offering us.
no, it's not that we should appreciate it. It's just that we should recognize that we have it and that we can use those freedoms to actually then strengthen our communities and strengthen ties with other communities.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh, we should be grateful for the handout. You know what I mean? Like, it sounded like that. But it's not that. It's the fact that today, if I wanted to, I could create a conversation, put it out, share it with white friends, share it with even white newspapers. And I don't even want to say white newspapers because, you know, we're all collectively involved and take ownership of these things. Otherwise, we are making ourselves a victim community who we don't take part in anything and therefore we're always going to be the victim and we're asking for our handout. No, we take ownership and we take action and we go out and...
Don't let it hold you back.
We never let it hold us. Exactly right. That's why I agree with you. And that's why I was asking you. You're someone who is a professional and an educator and a scientist and you have those really strong and valid views. How do you communicate that and how do you create that dialogue so that people can... Because look, you're not going to be able to, like, you know, when you're talking about reparations and people paying you back, that's going to be... It's going to be almost impossible to get it from a government. But what you can do, I imagine someone like you, is you can talk to your colleagues and you can say, hey, look, this is something that happened.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
Like, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? It's like, I would say, the people around me, I would say about maybe 5% probably racist. You know, in my...
It's a small minority.
You know, very, very small. And this is
Still crazy it's still crazy that it's 5%.
Yeah, I would say it's probably less than that.
Yeah.
But I have I have this theory where we live in this small bubble where we have non-racists. I think that's probably a word that we should really start using. Instead of white, we should be using racists and non-racists.
That's a better way of putting it.
But and we don't really experience or the racists they're racist because they haven't experienced us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
like just they don't know what racism is. Because I've never faced
they just hate us. Or we're something that is different. You know, and I've noticed that even now, actually, when you go to a predominantly white area, I get a lot of stares, with the beard and everything. It's weird. It's a weird for a group of people who have really good manners and etiquettes, really, or they want to have British values and etc. Staring is one of those things that you don't do.
Yeah.
Yet those same type of people are staring. And, we went to that area and I felt really uncomfortable. It's not because I'm not around white people.
Yeah.
I work in a white environment. Yeah, I do. It is multicultural, but there are a lot of whites there.
That was a funny reaction. We went to this park and it's white, pure white. And the first time I heard Abdin say he felt uncomfortable.
Really?
And he was just like, wow.
And, it was like all the heads start turning. As we walked by, all the heads
He felt
start
uncomfortable.
turning.
He did feel uncomfortable. I agree with you.
And, what is that? What is that? It was like we were in a zoo, some type of...
Yeah. I mean, that happens when I go to Bangladesh. People stare at me.
Yeah.
They just want money, that's why.
Yeah, that's a bit racist. But you're Bengali, so it's fine.
So... if I was to speak to people around me, I don't think I have to. I don't think I have to speak to the people around me because they're good people. They're non-racist, good people.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, this is the thing. You don't want to... You're just preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
Like people...
Like, when I spoke about the white guy I spoke to you about earlier, I had a conversation about politics. He wasn't a racist. And he doesn't see what I'm seeing. That's what I'm trying to say. He's not racist.
Yeah.
He's a good person. There was nothing bad about him, but the views he was having is very different to my view, how he sees the world. So I agree, a lot of your colleagues that aren't of ethnic minority, they are good people, but they won't see it. Like, they're not in constant interaction. They're never in that situation all the time. Yes, when you have that conversation, yes, it might trigger their head and be like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of wrong going on. When they go back home, they're back to their own little world. Very different to what we're living, especially the Americans, Black Americans.
I'm very conscious of the fact that I haven't answered your question, Jubair.
What was
Yeah, I've
that?
asked you twice now.
Yeah.
No, I'm
It's-
letting us get to it naturally. It's fine, and I realize you didn't, and I don't want to force it out in a way that's, like some things need to be said to lay the groundwork before you get there. So that's
what
fine.
question? Have I missed a question?
No, just I keep I keep saying to Abdin, like, you're an educator, you're a communicator. We're all communicators. We're doing it now. We're podcasting. How do we communicate
It's a difficult one.
and educate people? And one of the things I said to my friends on the group is, and I feel strongly about this, you can't force education on people who don't want to be educated. If they
Yeah,
don't
I
want to be
agree.
educated, you can't force it on them, because
I
you
don't
will
think
create,
it's about education. I think it's more about connection.
or even connection. You can't force connection on them
I-
if they don't want it.
I think it's about
Yeah.
acceptance. Accepting what's happened instead of ignoring what's happened.
Yep.
Because a lot of the times you bring a fact up, for instance, Churchill doing chemical warfare,
Yeah.
North Africa.
Yeah.
That's all hidden away. But they need to accept that.
Also, the famine in Bengal.
The family, but they need to accept all of this. This is, yes, he might be a great leader, but you need to accept that he's a racist as well.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people might be upset about
He's
this.
on the he's a racist on the record. There's no there's no.
But
like,
they're not accepting
argument
it.
about
When
that.
you put a point blank fact that yes, one of your greatest leaders was a racist, and they say nah, he wasn't. He had to do what he had to do. That's the answer you get. They can't accept he was racist until people start accepting what's happened in the past and accept it. That's when we can start moving in the right direction, and that's what's happening. People aren't accepting it.
Yeah.
I think, how I reacted is probably a reason why people aren't accepting it. Like, I've been thinking about your question, and, a lot of the times we can't connect with people because we become very defensive, very angry, very emotional. And it's quite hard for people to hear people who are emotional. Even me at the beginning, I'm going to say I was very emotional, and it was very hard for me to even hear myself.
Yeah.
And we have to understand it's the type of the brain that is, it's the reptilian brain, the primitive brain, the
amygdala.
and the lower parts of the brain that is charged in those moments, and those parts of the brain is instinctual. There is no reasoning with that part of the brain until you turn on the cortex, the boss of the brain, and we have a massive one, and I think for me is those connections, and it goes back to me saying the fact that people around me are good, and I feel like they're good non-racist people. Why is that? Because I have connected with them without having to say, guys, I'm a brown guy, or I'm a Muslim, but I'm not a racist, or I'm not racist, I'm not a terrorist.
You didn't have to apologize for who
No.
you are. Yeah.
I showed them who I am, and I think those types of connections and those types of experiences have changed people the most, as opposed to us trying to reason with somebody.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I personally think racism is probably driven by that primitive part of our brain, the amygdala, the part of the brain that looks and sees differences.
No, I can't see that.
I mean, because ultimately, what is race?
Because when no one's born racist, and what's the brain that we most
Well, I
primitive-
mean, if we look at the amygdala,
because a lot of thinking has to come into racism. You are not born racism.
so
You're not born
okay,
racist.
so what I mean by that, if you understand, if I try to explain, is animals will see a different animal as a different animal, and probably attack it or want to stay away from it, right? It drives that division. Doesn't
We're
it?
not different animals. We're one same animal or same creatures.
Even within the same species, you have this. They know that they're different, and usually they will want to drive away. I personally think that part. Obviously, the cortex is a very important part, but that part of the brain does show us what is different and what isn't different to us.
Yeah. So I think what you're trying to say is that when people see things that are different from how they identify as themselves, that emotional reptilian part activates, and it makes them act in a bit more of a sort of
aggressive way.
Aggressive. And
I'm more so
not a
the
logical way.
flight,
Is that what you're trying?
the
But
survival of the species.
I think Bablu's right though. There is a lot of conditioning that goes into racism.
There
as well.
there is a
Come on,
lot of conditioning,
we
but
were
ultimately, where is that conditioning happening?
Look,
Usually, the condition doesn't necessarily happen to the conscious brain.
No, but that conditioning, I mean, okay, maybe I might be misunderstanding what you're saying, but a lot of that conditioning comes from religious beliefs, like in certain Christian ideologies at the time of, the late 1800s and 1900s, they thought that the black man was inferior, and that even giving him Christ wasn't going to be, like Christ was white and all these things. That's not... that is something that's come from formulation and language and writing and planning and
But I mean, the thing is, Christianity doesn't say that. So what is driving that manipulation of that ideology?
Like, I was considered a quite white secondary school. I never knew what racism was until the age of 11.
Because you're saying as a young kid, you just
never knew what racism was.
Even those kids didn't see it as different, yeah.
Very multicultural, right? Black, Chinese, white, everyone getting along. As soon as I went to secondary school, racism was the most shocking thing. Like, my life turned upside down. I never knew what it was. I was put in this little group.
Shout out to Little Heath.
Like, I never knew what racism was until the age of 11, went to that white school.
For me, so for example, that Christian thing, there is no reasoning. Like, you know what I mean? There isn't the other way coming from reasoning.
No, they took scripture and they said, this means that.
So
that means
that's
that.
why I think it's driven from the bottom up. If that makes sense, where you see these changes, you see these differences, and then that primitive brain kicks in. Oh, I must be better than them, or I have to be better than them.
No, there's even like attempts at scientific approaches to making the differences more apparent. Like, for example, eugenics. Obviously, eugenics has been completely debunked as a fake science, but this is an attempt at people using their intellect to justify, the brain size and the different jaw and what this means.
But so that is what what I'm trying to say is, what is driving those thinking? Is it reasoning, or is it a reasoning which is driven by?
I see what you mean, but I don't think you can blame the brain for for example, the structure of the brain or the mechanism of the brain.
I don't think I'm blaming it, but like anything, something that is threatening, we are driven to anger, right? And that comes from the brain.
Yeah.
But you can't necessarily blame the brain, because you can still control it, right? So whatever you say, you might say something quite intellectual out of anger.
Yeah, but a lot of these like intellectual thoughts just they're just held as...
They work
held
together.
Like, for example, with the Nazis and their idea of like white supremacy and the Aryan race and stuff like that, that a lot of it is founded on some of their research, which obviously is false. It is false, but it's like thought about and calculated, and it's,
So this is the thing, isn't it? Reasoning doesn't come naturally, but emotions do come naturally, and they are created by the brain naturally. If that makes sense. So what I'm saying is, all these ideas, are they stemming from that primitive part of the brain, which is driving this idea, or they're different to me, the survival of the species, I am better, and etc. And because of now emotions, they're quite hard to express verbally or intellectually. So now that is those fundamental things are driving this reasoning, this logical, this intellectual arguments. So
like the instinctual reaction that someone has to seeing a difference in someone else's ethnicity forces them to start reason a certain way, even if that reasoning is false. Okay, all right. Well, I certainly acknowledge that could be a potential way. I don't know enough about neuroscience and the brain to say that that racism is, because it's almost like innate. Then you're saying that racism is innate.
I'm not saying racism is innate. Is how you interpret that.
Yeah.
Right, because if it was innate, then we wouldn't have this cortex. That cortex, a lot of stuff is innate. A lot of the ability to kill is very innate. We are innately driven to kill other things, but what stops us from doing it? The rational side of us, the cortex. And that is that we have to agree. We have to know that there is a very uncontrollable part of us.
Yeah.
You know, we have all these destructive emotions, and they are all innate.
Yeah.
And
One thing I would definitely say is, you know, especially from that line of thinking, is definitely the case in what we're seeing now in the States, is that, you know, these police officers who are in these, and this is no defense of their actions, but when you see these police officers who are in highly charged situations where they might be pulling over someone, and in the States, everyone's allowed to carry firearms. When they pull over this person, they are in fight or flight mode. You know, their adrenaline is ramped up. They've got to get this person to comply with them. And so when they are giving them instructions and this person behaves in a way that is unexpected or maybe random or some way unaccounted for, unplanned for, they react, and they react with, like Bablu's, your colleague was saying, very heavy-handedly and with force that is so deadly that it, in all of these cases, it's killed people. But what's crazy, what's very strange in a lot of these situations is that it seems to be that black people are being killed far more in much higher numbers than their white counterparts who are stopped and pulled over. And this is where the frustration lies, is that this particular community seems to be being targeted. And so is it institutional? Is it something that, look, police forces around the world need to take this on board and start educating their staff and start creating connections within their staff, so that there is an approach that when these situations happen, it doesn't lead to some deadly force. You know, like, definitely, I agree with you. Especially in that situation, I can imagine the amygdala has some crazy blood flow going to it. You know, when
you know, that's very interesting. What is it that is driving the police officer to think there is more of a threat if a black man is a white police officer, or even a black one, that if a black man is holding a gun than a white man is holding a gun? Both of those situations are very charged, you know, and I'm sure a lot of these police officers, they would say their training kicks in, and majority of the time they're probably not thinking in those moments. It's quite difficult.
They are thinking, because a white man carrying a gun, a black man carrying a gun, or arresting a black man, arresting a white man, the consequences are very different. You kill an innocent black man 9 out of 10 times, you would get away with it. You kill an innocent white man, good chance you'll lose your job.
In fact, there's a case there's a case that happened in the States where a Somali police officer, so a black officer, was called out to a domestic disturbance in the night. Now, he got there, and obviously he's in a charged situation. It's night. He's heard something bad's happening, and some sound like caused him to turn around, and he had his firearm drawn, and he shot and fired, and he killed someone. And it turned out that the person that he killed was a white lady. Now, what happened to this Somali police officer? He was put in jail, I think for 12 years, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that's something that you have not seen in a majority. In fact, even the case of, you know, the two police officers who went on the vigilante hunt for for that guy who they followed after him, and then they shot and killed him.
Yeah, the jogger.
Yeah, the jogger. They completely got off.
No, I thought the case was still going on.
It's now the attention's coming back on, but because of coronavirus and everything, the heat started lifting off them.
I'm so happy it came back on the.
Yeah,
I'm so happy.
Yeah. So
there has to be consequences. Your actions. If you could get away with something, you know, why not?
Yeah, but I mean, of course. But the thing is, like, in those situations, I think the problem is far worse than someone is actually thinking that this.
Yeah,
person,
so they are thinking. They are 100%.
I think it's worse than that.
I think they're definitely thinking it.
What do you mean by they're not thinking?
I think it's very much ingrained. That when someone, and we, you know, those experiments where the doll experiments. Which one is bad and black doll, white doll, and children are asked which one is the bad doll.
Who was this done by?
I can't quite remember.
Is it American or?
It was a psychologist.
So can you just explain what it is, and then?
So it's an experiment done to illustrate this kind of
ingrained racism.
Maybe, right? There was a black doll and there's a white doll, and children were asked who's the bad doll, and they would point at the black doll. I think that is far worse than someone that is thinking.
What do you mean that's far worse than
Because
someone is
I
thinking?
mean, that person just automatically thinks this person is
But
completely
that's-
different.
sorry,
to
you
me.
think
This
that's what
person
is happening? Then they're
How-
not
yeah,
thinking.
yeah.
Yeah.
How were these children that was done it on, or was it babies? Was it on adults?
There were children, you know.
So there must
there
be
were, there were enough to understand what is.
But someone must
Who
have
is the-
already, as we mentioned earlier, that's been put into them at a young age. Because as I said, I didn't know. I couldn't tell the difference between a black and a white
No,
person
I'm
on the
not.
ground.
I don't think I'm trying to say that it's innate or anything like that. I'm not saying it's innate.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying that there is an ingrained thing going on here where
These police officers are conditioned to just
Are
react a certain
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
And as soon as they see, oh, that's a bad man, and that's that again. It goes back to that
I
connection.
think you're both saying the same thing.
I
I
think-
think
yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
For example, if a police officer goes to a white neighborhood, a rich white neighborhood, let's use that as an example.
Yeah.
He arrests. If he arrests.
his assumptions are going to be different.
His assumption is arrest
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
He could be. They might be paying money to the police department, or he could lose his job, or he would never get. Like, he's got so much more consequences purely for approaching and even arresting that person. He's thinking his whole livelihood could depend on this arrest. So there's a big difference. He's thinking about his life, not just purely on I'm going to arrest him and I'm going to do my job properly. He's thinking about.
No, I'm not saying. I'm not saying that. I don't. So yeah, most likely they are thinking,
Yeah.
but the fact that the non-thinking part, I personally think is more dangerous.
And
than
Yes.
the thinking part.
Yeah.
Another thing you think you got.
And that goes back to that connection that I was talking about, right? How are those police officers going to start changing the way that they are thinking? They are subconsciously processing things. Is by being around these people, being around black people. Yeah, ultimately you develop these things because of obviously the external things that you get, right?
Yeah.
But you have to have that ultimate difference in those people. Why is it that externally someone can, even with white people, if a person looks a certain way, you automatically think, oh, that person will probably be.
Yeah, so a police officer, first of all, American police officer, for example, I don't know what he's thinking, but I'm making the assumption here that when he sees a black person, he's slightly more on higher guard. And secondly, poorer areas tend to have more violence and crime. So he's even more on a guard. So I reckon that when I mentioned earlier about Native Americans, Aborigines, and then black Americans, the biggest thing that stuck up for me is they're all poor, from a poor community, high crime rates. I think we need to be looking at that part as well, is in how is their country or how is the government helping these people?
Yeah.
Because if you know this particular area, say you know a rough area.
It's a cycle, isn't it? It's a cycle. The racism causes the environment, which causes the
Yeah.
racism.
Yeah.
And like for us, if we go to say we wouldn't go to say that we were in Whitley or something at night time, we know the area is going to be bad because we've heard stories. We're not going to be on a high guard because it's a poor area, it's a community.
Yeah.
So you're already going to be vigilant. So with a police officer, he's got a gun. He might have slightly racist intent, I don't know. And secondly, he knows it's a poor community. He's a black man. They're the most people. There's
But
more
the
black
thing is,
people.
you have white people living in poorer communities, right?
You got
as well.
more.
So again, it goes back. It keeps going for me.
No. The majority of the black people are one of the poorest in America.
Yeah, but there are white people.
Yeah.
I don't hear of many.
Yeah, but then again, it's the same argument that there are a few black racists. Like there's few of everything in. But I'm talking about majority here. I'm talking about the little individuals.
No. So what I'm trying to say is, I haven't heard of a white gangster being killed by police officer.
I see what you're saying.
or
Yeah.
A person who's lived in the same environment who is white being killed by.
That's what I
so
meant.
what is happening there?
Yeah, it's got two things which I meant.
For me, it keeps going back to that subconscious level of thinking.
Yeah, but that's what I meant earlier.
Perception.
The police officer's got, as I said, it's a poor, crime-ridden black area, and he might have a racist intent inside him. As I'm saying, it's two things triggering, not just one thing. That's what I think. I think it's a couple of things rather than one thing. And the only way to deal with it, and I spoke to you about a study in North Europe when I said, the government gave everyone a wage of £30,000 a year. Even if they didn't have a job, they were bums doing nothing. Everyone got a 30 grand wage above the age of 18. and what they saw was everyone's health went up, education went up, and they saw crime rates go down. Everyone would just live in harmony. So I think that there's that area that we need to look at as well.
Supporting
Yes.
people and giving them opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if an area is poor and there's got a high crime rate, you are going to be a bit more vigilant. And
Yeah, especially a community that has a problem with trusting the law enforcement. Like if
Yeah.
there's a historic relationship of oppression, then you're not going to give that law enforcement any kind of credibility when it comes. And so when it does come to your neighborhood, there's going to be animosity from both sides. You know, like
Yeah, and ultimately, you know, again, I keep going back to that connection. I think a lot more of the ethnic minority need to get into the policing industry. You know.
Yeah, I think that would I think that would certainly help, at least with other police officers in within the ranks who are white, and having a non-white colleague. You know, their understanding, and like you said, it will create connection.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I met a few ethnic minority police officers, and they're just as bad. They already make judgments on.
Oh
who
yeah,
you are.
but the thing is that I personally think
I've come across some, and they've already judged me.
I honestly think
I've come across a couple, and they've already judged me.
I think what you're talking about is they've inherited the systemic
Yeah.
racism, and I think what Abdin's talking about is that systemic racism will be changed the more you get these people in, especially intelligent people who can communicate and can create connection, and it won't happen overnight. Certainly, it's not going to happen overnight, but it needs to happen.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is, as humans, we have this weird thing of conformity. You know, so if a ethnic minority goes into a predominantly white industry, they're going to try to conform or try to associate themselves with those same
Just to
people,
make life
trying
easy,
say,
right? Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'm not going to be biased or anything like that. I'm like you guys. Accept me.
Yeah.
And ultimately, with a lot of these, maybe some of these police officers that you've come across, I think there is this element. But I've had police officers say to, you know, my nephew, he was young, he got into trouble, and the police officer said to him, you know what? You have to be extra vigilant because they're out to get us.
Also, the police officer was a minority, and he said that too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, you know, I have another cousin who's in the police force up north, and he said he's racist.
Mm-hmm.
Majority of the people he works with are racist,
Yeah.
and he's policing in a predominantly Asian area.
Yeah.
So how do you change that? You don't change that. It's very difficult to change that with words. How many people have said stuff?
It's their
The way-
profiling system. That's what it is.
Of course, but you need to. The way to change people is through heart, man. You know, you need to connect with them. You need to tell them. You know, you need to show them that you are a human being. You know, until we don't see that, we'll look at people different.
I'll tell you a quick amazing story that I heard on a podcast. It's a guy called Daryl Davis. I highly recommend anyone watching, listening, even you guys if you haven't, listen to this, because it will give you a lot of hope going forward. And we need hope, man. Like, we don't need fear, and we don't need more anger. We need hope, right? Like you said, hearts, and hearts will connect through hope as well. Daryl Davis is a guy who he grew up mainly like as a musician, and in that world.
What's his ethnicity?
He's black. He's African American, and I think he traveled around overseas and stuff because his parents were in the military, and so because of that, he would be in army bases overseas. And once he was just joined in a parade in some foreign country. I think it was Italy, or I can't remember where exactly, but he was just going along in the parade, and the people saw him, this little kid, he's like only maybe like 11, and they were being so horrible to him, like throwing stuff and saying things, and he couldn't understand what's going on. So he ran home and he said, like, Mom, why are these people being so horrible to me? Like, I
How
didn't
old was he?
11, like he's a kid.
Okay.
And his mum said, baby, it's because, you know, it's the color of your skin. And up until that point, similar with you, like up until that age, subhanAllah, something amazing about that age, we start realizing what's going on. He was like, oh, I didn't even know I was different to other people. And so he grew up, because that was so traumatic and left such an imprint on him, he grew up just like trying to understand people, like, what are you thinking, what's going through your mind, why are you thinking the way you are. So growing up, he got into like a blues band and a jazz band, and he'd play in the American South. And you know where, you know what organization started in the American South. So he'd play in bars where there were Klan members, right?
Wow.
And then one day, this Klan member comes up to him and says, hey boy, you're really good. Like telling him he's really talented. Yeah.
Him at the same time.
Yeah. So he kind of like asked him, yeah, like, why don't you join me for a beer afterwards?
Oh
like
my
talk
God,
about it. And so
really?
he got talking to this Klan guy.
Yeah.
And first he was just joking around, talking about music, talking about food and whatever. And eventually he started talking about his beliefs.
Who?
The Daryl Davis asked the Klan guy like about his beliefs, like, why do you feel the way you do? And slowly, as the guy was connecting with him and laughing with him, it started bringing his guard down. And the guy started saying, it's just the way here. It's nothing personal, really. And so he made it his. When he realized that that's so stupid, he made it his mission that, what, I'm gonna just. Bruv, Daryl Davis is, for all intents and purposes, a crazy guy, because he goes, I'm going to just start meeting up with Klan members in proper Klan bars and trying to figure out why they're racist and why they are the way they are. And so he started connecting with these guys, becoming their friends. He'd tell them, I want to do an interview.
And he's a
with
proper black guy.
A proper black guy. He's not like,
fair skinned.
Fair skinned, yeah. Like, I don't know what that means, but he's proper black. So he'd asked these guys to do an interview with them. And his white friend, who was a lady, like would pretend to be a secretary and say, Mr. Davis will meet you now. He's doing a journalist report on you and whatever. And these Klan members didn't know he was black, and they'd come to meet up with him. They'd see him and they'd freak out, like, this man's black. But they'd sit down and they'd be like, okay. They'd be awkward at first. And eventually they'd tell him the story after some tense standoffs. And I won't ruin those standoffs for you because he tells them so brilliantly in the interview. But Daryl Davis. But the moral of the story, or the ending rather, is that some of these really high-ranking Klan guys, like wizards and imperial officers. Wizard of the Klan, they have these weird names.
Yeah, with the purple ones have purple suits.
Yeah.
Black ones.
These guys eventually would renounce their Klan membership and association, even
wow.
with threat of death to them, because they became friends with him. They became really close with him, and they were like, you know what, Daryl, like, I'm leaving it. And then they'd give him the gift of the Klan uniform.
You see, I think that there should, listening to those and then thinking about the institutionalized racism, you have to deal with them differently.
Yeah, I agree.
I think with individual people, the connection is needed.
Yeah.
And with the institutionalized racism, you need protests. You need people to be angry.
Yeah.
And usually a lot of the times over history, what we've seen is these very elite people, they just change faces.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least they change faces, right? Mm-hmm. We had the bourgeoisies in the French Revolution, etc. Ultimately they just change faces. And they just...
Do you see there's going to be any change after all this protest calms down? Do you think there's going to be a change? Do you actually
looking at my friends, some of these guys are talking about it, and they brought it to my attention, which means, like, it wasn't like I had to send them pictures and whatever. They're now thinking about it, and it's in their consciousness. And even if that's it, that's a bit
that's
of
more than
it was
happened before.
And it might, I'm sad to say, maybe it will take more deaths, but that's the road to change is bloody and long. So it's sad, but I'm hopeful. That's my personality anyway. I'm hopeful, inshallah, that people will start learning and they will start getting.
People are visually impacted. If he was shot for the same reason, we wouldn't even know, because he was visually so impactful.
Exactly.
That's why people are reacting. Just like the do you remember the immigrants?
The Turkish boy.
People didn't really care until they saw an image of the dead little boy.
Yeah.
And I think this is the reason why. So.
Well, even then, some sadistic people weren't. They weren't fazed by it. They made it.
So we're coming up to an hour. Do you guys want to just wrap up? Like, what do you think is going to happen going forward with all these protests?
My honest opinion, we've had this before. We had the riots and LA riots. Same thing. Nothing happens. Nothing changed. Yes, it's protests. We're making a vocal. But in America, I can't see anything changing. Even if you had a black president, again, it wouldn't change.
Abdin?
I think it's unveiled the true nature of the administration at the now. Mm-hmm. And from what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing is people are going and trying to make a change in terms of votes, and they're trying to acknowledge that they do have a little bit of power. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important when people need to know that they have power. I don't think that we should ever be suppressed by any sort of government, any sort of institution.
Yeah.
And I hope it changes. But I really think that this will empower people. At least.
So realistically, what do you think it's actually being a realist? Where do you think it leads us?
I can't predict that, but I'm sure this would empower more people than staying quiet. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just want to say for people out there to stay safe, to look after one another, and Black Lives Matter.